It was first year in college, fell in love, was hanging out with all my best friends. We went our separate ways that summer and made a vow to stay together. But long story short, we broke up. And then when we got back after the summer, we ended up getting back together. But the trust was gone. I never knew how to deal with any emotions, so I just kind of bottled them. I was smoking an awful lot of weed at the time. And this particular night, I was doing bongs to kind of run away and just escape reality. And I found myself hiding in the toilet, having an incredibly intense panic attack. It kind of just like catapulted me into this world of anxiety, pain, panic, and dread. I was shitting myself because I thought like I was literally dying. Everything kind of just spiraled and it wasn't fun.
Welcome to another episode of Through Help and Back. For the big fans of Snoopy and Peanuts, it was a dark and stormy night. That's what we're dealing with in New England today. If you guys don't know, whether you think we're the best podcast in the world, we're certainly the most dedicated. Me and producer Ian are here up in the studio on a late night here in New Hampshire. We're tipping off here about 10 o'clock, and we're going to go for a while. So very honored to come to you in the middle of the night, but it is dark and it is stormy, so it's a good night to be inside, talking with some friends and getting some stories and some information that can help people. As we know, we're always talking about mental health, we're talking about addiction, but most importantly, we're talking about wellness and we're talking about hope. We like to share these stories that start rough but end in a good place to kind of let everybody know that hope is possible and progress is possible. So, Ian, how are you hanging in on this dark and stormy night? You doing okay over there?
Well, I've got a ride tonight, so I'm pretty lucky. Pretty lucky. I usually walk, so
that's true.
I've got backup.
Ian is haunting our town. We talked last time about the dark alleys and that you're walking down, and
I got to keep the city safe, man.
You're right. Maybe you are. You might be the Dark Knight. There might be something to that, man. I've noticed. Yeah.
You're the one with a brand new black truck, so
I do.
You get to claim that title. Not
do have a dark black truck. We should do the podcast from the truck. It's pretty spacious. I'm pretty excited about the truck. So no, but I'll tell you. So you talk about walking in. So I was walking in today, and we live in kind of a small town in New England, and I did notice, because I'm not usually out at this hour, like every city, we kind of had. The homeless situation has popped up, right? There's people on the street. It kind of took my thoughts to places where, what is that fork in the road that, how does somebody end up in that situation? How does somebody end up in those dark places? And sadly, it's often a fine line between, positivity and a life well lived and troubling circumstances that can come on. In addiction, we talk about sometimes a door gets opened and you can spend a lifetime trying to close that door again. And that connects to our guest today. We have, sometimes we have helpers on, sometimes we have people who have experienced the help. And today we have somebody who has a personal experience with that journey from difficult situations to rebuilding their life and constructing a life worth living and a better future. And that is Nicky Cullen. Nicky, is nice to have you here. Nicky he's not in a dark and stormy night. You can see the sunshine coming through. So there's a nice cross reference there. I've got the dark and the shadows, and you've got the hope and the light. So it's nice to have you, Nicky. I'm really glad you're here to balance us out.
Thanks so much for having me, Jason. I'm excited to be here. Yes, the sun is shining here.
Yeah. Where are you in the world? I don't have to get your address, but what part of the world are you in?
I'll just pin you my location.
Please do.
I'm in Bali, so it'll take a while to get here. In Bali, Indonesia.
Wonderful.
Other side of the world, about 24-hour trip.
24 hours to get there, right? Because you're 12 hours ahead, and so
transfers and stuff like that for New York. Yeah, it would be.
Was that your trip? Did you start out in New York and end up in Bali, or how do you end up in Bali? Are you native to there, or did you get there at the end of your travels?
Yeah, listen, it's crazy. I don't know how I'm still here. I'm Irish. I lived there all my life up until about 10 years ago. I moved to Vancouver for 3 years. Then I was on a bridging gap for my visa, and I decided to go to Indonesia for 6 months and never really returned. So that was 7 years ago, and it's mental.
It's crazy. Life's twists and turns. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to do this for a minute, and you snap your fingers, and it's 10 years.
Yeah. And I remember meeting people when I got here, and they were here going, "Oh, we've been here for 5 years," and I thought, like, Jesus, what are you doing?
Right. Those are the crazy people, and now you're one of them.
12 years now, and I'm on 7, going on 8.
That's awesome, man. How do you pick a place like Indonesia? I'm wondering, was that a destination for you? Did you always like have it in the back of your head? What was the inspiration behind that?
Like, I've traveled a lot before, when in my younger days, and I skipped over Indonesia, but I always had friends who talked about Bali, and I was big into yoga at the time, and there's amazing surf out in Indonesia, an expat community. So I just decided that was the one spot I didn't go to, so I got to go there. Yeah, I don't know. I didn't really give it too much thought, honestly.
Well, I mean, listen, that's part of what, a big thing that we've talked about is that we're here to learn and we're here to evolve and we're here to kind of have those different experiences. And what better way to have those experiences than to put yourself in positions and places that you've never been and see what happens, man. So it's kind of there's some bravery behind it. There's some craziness behind it, but I'm glad to see that it seems like it's working out really well for you.
Yeah, it's been pretty good. Can't complain.
And so profession-wise, like I said, I have a lot of therapists. I have a lot of, psychologists and things like on the show, but you're actually a writer. So can you tell me a little bit about your work and what your inspiration is and what kind of style and what kind of things are you writing about?
Like professionally, I do work with people with anxiety and panic disorder and stuff like that. So that's kind of like, I've written a blog for about 6 years now. And I've written for some other publications as well. So a lot of my writing is around mental health. It's a little bit raw. I swear a lot. I kind of try to bring a little bit of fun and humor to what can often be a very dark subject, obviously. You need that.
I gotta brag a little bit, Nicky. I got the sweetest, just most kind therapist from New York. Actually, she was on the show earlier today, and we got her to say the F word like multiple times. So like all of that is welcome, man. The cussing is welcome because this is a very raw subject. I mean, you bring some levity to it, and we talk about the light, but man, when it comes to mental health, wellness, I mean, these are life and death issues. And so if you can't drop an F-bomb from time to time or, gosh, what are we talking about here? The stakes are pretty high. So.
Yeah, okay, I won't let you down on that
one. We're planting the seed. So from an inspiration standpoint, what got you working with anxiety disorders and people with anxiety? Why is that interesting to you? Why is that where you focused your efforts?
Well, I mean, honestly, I wish I never did.
Yes.
It wasn't like I didn't read a book once and just thought, oh, this would be cool. I want to go explore this field. About 22 years ago, I was kind of, it's a very long story, obviously, as everybody's is, but to shorten it a little bit, everything was great. It was first year in college, fell in love, was hanging out with all my best friends. We went our separate ways that summer and made a vow to stay together. But long story short, we broke up. And then when we got back after the summer, we ended up getting back together, but the trust was gone. I never knew how to deal with any of my emotions, so I just kind of bottled them. And I was smoking an awful lot of weed at the time. I mean, I always did, but on this particular night, I was doing bongs to kind of run away and just escape reality. And I found myself hiding in the toilet, having an incredibly intense panic attack. And what I now know was also a psychosis that kind of just like catapulted me into this world of anxiety, pain, panic, and dread. I ended up having to run out of the house, like with all my best friends in the other room. I forgot my phone and I was shitting myself because I thought like I was literally dying, or I'd certainly need to have to call an ambulance. So I marched back up those steps and rang the doorbell to get my phone, and then immediately shot myself some more and just legged it down the road. The reason I say it was like also a little bit of a psychosis is because when I was walking home, I thought blood was coming from my ears. I thought I was pissing in my pants. It was horrific. And yeah, nothing was it was like brain pickled immediately. And there was, the recovery from that was a very long, drawn out, dark, painful place. Took me years to figure out that what a panic attack even was. And I'd seen multiple specialists at this stage. I was having MRIs, ECGs, the whole lot. And, oh, nothing's wrong with you, you're fine. And I was saying, I'm not fucking fine. I'm just like, I can't function in the world. I go into a shop to buy a pack of crisps and I end up fucking having a panic attack, but I don't know I'm having a panic attack. I drop the crisps and run out of the shop. I should be able to walk in and buy some crisps and a drink if I want. I'm not fine. So that just drove me mad, and everything kind of just spiraled, and it wasn't fun. It wasn't fun. So I didn't, there's such important, vital lessons that you pick up if you're catapulted into this journey. And it's not like it's survival. It's absolutely essential. Like you've no choice in the matter. It's like, so I'm sneaking around self-help sections long before they were cool, picking up books about mental health. When I eventually, the first book I picked up was where I felt like, oh shit, I find it, because I'd lost all hope. And it was 5 years, had a headache every day for those 5 years, and, drank way too much to just kind of escape the pain. And I saw a book and it was called When Panic Attacks. And I was just there going, shit, that's what I'm doing. So that's what I'm doing. Like, I am literally panicking all the time and it's attacking me. So I bought that book, and even buying a book like that was like shameful back then. But I went home and read it and I was here going, fuck, this is it. I have a panic disorder. It took me 5 years to learn that.
5 years with all those specialists, all the healthcare, all the experts, and that's the first mention of a panic disorder?
I mean, I'm sure I'd butt heads with a few of them on this one, but for me, it was certainly never explained in a way that I could comprehend or understand. And it's also hard because you're in such a, I was such a state for those 5 years. So it's hard to remember everything with absolute clarity. But as far as I'm concerned, and believe me, I've thought about it an awful lot. It wasn't until I saw that book, and that was roughly 5 years, and I had a headache all the time for those 5 years, unless I was absolutely shit-faced. And I mean, I would have to get shit-faced to get rid of the headache. That's what it was.
Thinking about your triggering event with this happening, I mean, had you had any history of panic, anything in your family, mental health wise? I mean, were there any signs or symptoms that you were at risk for something like this?
Obviously, as time goes on, you get older, you're trying to figure out answers, you look back. So there were two times. I was always kind of a shy kid, but I was also loud and popular and boisterous and rebellious and all that kind of stuff. But there was a timidness to me, and there was a kind of underlying fear that, would prevent me from doing a lot of things. And I definitely can recall two panic attacks. Nothing like that one, but I can definitely recall at least two panic attacks when I was younger. One when I was around, I want to say 10, and the other maybe around 14, 15. And then there's other periods where I felt like intense anxiety as well. But so it was there. The writing was on the wall. But we don't know.
How could you diagnose that at 10, right? Like, how could you come into the house and be like, hey, I think I'm showing early symptoms of panic disorder? You're 10. I mean, there's no way, right? I mean, just, what was that? And you move on with your life.
Back then as well, that you could just shut up, there's nothing wrong with you kind of thing. But
Well, and that's what I was curious about too, because I wonder what your theories are now looking back, and we'll talk about your progress to a place where you can get healthy enough to even look back, right? Because I've shared on the show several times, I've had panic attacks in the past and probably dealt with a panic disorder for a while. The joke is I used to help people all day long, 8-9 hours of therapy, and I was helping people with anxiety and panic attacks, and then I'd have one on the way home. It was like the most ridiculous experience ever. But do you have any theories as to why this hit you so hard? I mean, was it the drug use as a contributing factor? Was it, the ability to, you said things were bottled up and you really weren't adept at talking about your emotions? I mean, was it an accumulation effect? Like, why do you think you got hit so hard so fast?
I think it's multifaceted. I think, my parents are amazing. I'm never going to say a bad word about them and all that kind of stuff. But sometimes we just aren't given the communication tools or have that open communication in a household or whatever. So that would certainly be a contributing factor. I mean, because I was kind of like anxious or whatever. But, I was always a candidate for therapy. Always. I would, regardless, like that first year in college was great, but regardless, I had these demons and they were going to come out and haunt me one way or another. Now, my belief is that because, unfortunately, like that, when I went in and suggested to a friend, come on, we go make a bong and go to town on that I would put down as one of the biggest mistakes in my life. So I believe that I was already a candidate. I was going to have to do a lot of work, which everybody, like this being an adult seems to be about these days, especially when you're consuming this kind of content and just kind of like diving into this world to try and figure out your problems. So that was always going to be there for me. I was always going to have to overcome that. But I think the fact that night I abused weed. I'm all right for legalizing weed and all that kind of stuff, but I don't agree that it's harmless.
I agree with you on the second point.
And it fucked me up on multiple levels and made it like excruciatingly painful and difficult.
Well, and probably just from a diagnostic standpoint, probably contributed to what they call drug-induced psychosis. I mean, if you threw into your first panic attack when you were inebriated, you've got the potential to open up parts of your brain that otherwise wouldn't have been accessible to you and can create hallucinations, can create, feelings that can be attributed to the weed that you're using, may not be connected to reality, but your reality was you were feeling all these things at once and you had an impaired ability to process that. So you probably threw yourself into some drug-induced psychosis as well.
100%. And then there was like the PTSD that kind of like evolved out of that and CPTSD too. So it was a bit of a real shit show. So I think it's multifactorial, if I've said that correctly. And I think weed is definitely the one thing that to this day I'd take back.
Yeah, and in the States right now, I mean, that's the big thing is it's sort of like a lackadaisical kind of attitude towards it. Like, well, everybody's kind of smoking weed, so what's the point? But at the risk of sounding 150 years old and like you kids get off my lawn, it's not harmless. And it's actually pretty dangerous, especially for a young developing brain. You're talking about early in college. Our brains aren't done even structurally till age 25. And then you start and also weed is not the weed that it was in the groovy 60s and 70s. It's like it's on steroids, right? Like the THC content is different. It's specially grown. And so, look, it's a psychoactive substance. It's dangerous. It's bad for our brains. I know there's some effects to it. I've had some fun nights, with weed involved, but that's getting lucky. That's not necessarily something you can count on all the time, So I think it's worth another look. I think we're going to regret that. I really do. Down the road.
The legalization.
Yeah, I do. I really do. Because for me, and this is what I think. So when I was growing up, so everybody drank, right? And, if you were doing drugs, it meant you were smoking marijuana, right? Well, now marijuana socially is kind of viewed the same as drinking. It's just like, well, it's recreational, and everybody's got gummies and they've got it in their vape and they've got, they're doing dab. And so it's almost like for kids, it doesn't count. And so for that rebellious youth, the kids who want to push it a little bit to do drugs, now they have to get into pills. Now they have to get into cocaine. Now they have to get into injectables. And so I think it's pushed the bar up a little bit in terms of what's acceptable and what's not. And when you talk about treatment need, 22% of people who use marijuana are going to develop a treatment need at some point in their life. It's much lower for alcohol and things like that. So I'm not a pro-alcohol guy, anti-marijuana guy. I'm actually thinking there should be limitations on both. But it's not harmless. It's not Cheech and Chong. It's not.
I really agree, and it's one of those things because there is a very strong, even in the world of podcasting, is Rogan's. I'm not here to shit on it.
Yeah, do your thing.
Because he's a legend, but it's just so. If anyone says that there's any potential danger of weed, it's just ridiculous. And I remember when I lived in Vancouver, that 420 or whatever that special weed day is it 420 or
April 20th? Yeah.
And so everyone gets blazed at 20 past 4 in the afternoon, and this Robson Square in downtown Vancouver. And this was 7 or 8 years ago, so it was weed still wasn't legal there. I think it's legal there now, but it still wasn't legal there. But it was they'd look over it, but there was literally stalls all over the place just selling all different types of weeds. Sativa, the chronic, all these different blends or brands or whatever you want to call them. And I literally saw about 4 people taken off in an ambulance. And I was here going because there were all the edibles as well, which kind of fuck you up on another level. And you're here going, those lads are fucking having a drug-induced psychosis. That's not going to be, they're not going to wake up tomorrow feeling good about themselves.
And think about the dangerous situations you put yourself in when you're inebriated, right? How many people are driving under the influence? How many people are making risky decisions, accidents, even suicide? The vast majority of suicide ideation gets pushed over if there's drugs involved, right? They're more likely to follow through and actually do that. And then also, I think we ask the wrong questions. There's this idea around weed that it won't hurt you. You can't die. So it can't hurt you, right? But I think the right question is, how does it help, right? How does it help you? And if it doesn't, if it's just to feel different, well, then what do we need it for, right? Because what world do you want to live in? My 7-year-old, my daughter who's 10 now, when she was 7, I can remember we're in New England, so very permissive in certain areas, you know what I mean? And she told me it smells like somebody smoking weed at 7. And I thought, this is horseshit. I hate this for her. I don't want my 7-year-old to be in a world where she's like, oh, it's just weed. You know what I mean? I know what that smells like. Why does my 7-year-old need to know what that is? And I don't know. Again, maybe that's making me an old grumpy father, you know what I mean? But it's just I don't know if I want that as part of their innocence and part of their growing up, that it's just somebody smoking weed again. What's the big deal? I don't know. We should do better. We can do better than that.
And I know friends as well that I remember we had one friend once, and he just kind of disappeared off the face of the surface. And he was a lovely guy, and his parents didn't live in the country, so it was his one brother and one sister living in the parents' house. And the lads went up going where's Killian? And the sister goes, oh, I don't know. And they saw him look out the front window. And then they just kind of pushed in, because it'd been a few weeks, they were getting worried, and they found him hiding in the closet. And that was a drug-induced psychosis, which kind of threw him into a world of panic and anxiety and dread as well. So it should get a lot more fucking airtime, because You won't find anyone on this planet who's been through that has anything positive to say about the experience. Like, it is hell.
Why put people at risk? And then you mentioned Rogan and Elon was on there, and I got their names kind of confused there. But like, okay, so nobody's under any obligation to be the role model for anybody in the world, right? Like Charles Barkley used to say, like, I'm not your role model, right? Like, because he would act like a jerk and throw people through bar windows, and they're like, you're a bad role model. And he's like, well, but it's not my job to be a role model. So fair play. Like, Joe Rogan doesn't have to be a role model for the world, but to have that platform and act that way, your choice. But to do that makes you a shitty role model. It just does. And maybe you don't care about that, and maybe that's okay. Like, all good. You're under no obligation. But just know, you've got a huge platform. You could use it in a positive way. And largely, I think he does. I mean, I listen to his stuff all the time. I think he's great. But in that regard, C-, maybe a D. Just kind of a bad role model there, and it's going to affect people,
Yeah. I just think it would be wise to let people know that, like, there are, it's not uncommon for people to really enjoy their lives because of this stuff.
For sure.
That's kind of my viewpoint on it. But
all right, we've done it. We've got on our soapbox, and we've stumped for, reversing legalization, man. So there you go. We'll see what kind of dent that makes. I'm curious too, because I think this is like the third person from Ireland on our show, right? Is that right? And you'd mentioned, like, I have great parents, but it really wasn't a great communication, share your emotions, like heart on your sleeve type family. Is that a cultural thing? I mean, I've never been to Ireland. Is that pretty standard for Irish families? Like, sort of like, that lack of communication or that bottling of feelings? Because I have a small sample size, but I'm 3 for 3 now, people from Ireland that have said a version of that exact story, which was, I never really was taught to process my feelings. I never was really even allowed or encouraged. And I'm wondering if that's just bad luck or if that's a cultural phenomenon.
yeah, I mean, I guess in the nature of your podcast, you're going to go, you're always going to be 4 for 4, 5 for 5, 6 for 6.
Good point.
I do believe it's cultural, but it's interesting because I think, like, Ireland and the UK are it's very different to the way, let's say, Americans are brought up, where it's like you're bigged up a lot by, you can do whatever, like you're kind of, a lot of American families and American kids are built in self-belief, and we know that can go too far, and, like, there's a little bit more doubt and a little bit more of a negativity to the Irish, and some of that's humor and all that kind of stuff. I don't know, it's a tough one to answer.
Yeah, and being here in New England, like near Boston, obviously high, heavy Irish population, it just seems to be kind of some self-sabotage and self-defeating kind of, and nobody can rise too far too fast. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. It just does feel like there's a little bit of, like, what they call crab bucket syndrome, right? Like, you put crabs in a bucket, one climbs up, and that's cool. But once it breaks from the pack, the others will gang up and reach and pull it back into the bucket, right? That's the crab bucket syndrome.
Yeah, I think most people would agree that there's a bit of that going on.
So back to your particular situation, I'm also interested in the role of this relationship because part of it is the drug-induced psychosis, part of it is your predisposition to panic and anxiety, but it also feels like this was a particularly damaging relationship, or the loss of this relationship was particularly impactful to you. So do you have any theories on why that hit so hard? I mean, was it toxic in and of itself, or was it just the loss of it, or just kind of a bad luck in terms of coincidences?
Fuck, you're going after it.
I gotta try.
I wouldn't say it was. Listen, she's an amazing girl, and I have nothing but wishing her the best or anything like that. I wouldn't say it was. I was young. We were young. We went to the same school together. I was like, I was always a bit of an avoidant type character, but once all of a sudden you're going out and you're getting drink and stuff like that, it was kind of easy to hook up with girls back then. And then we'd been together in school, and I was always running away from the relationship. And then, when college started, it was like, eventually we just here going like, oh yeah, hang on, we're in a relationship here. And then it was like, well, hang on, we love each other, or, supposedly. So I think it was a perfectly healthy relationship. There are obviously things in hindsight when you look back, but the unhealthy shit happened afterwards, because, it was just like she was away with all the girls, and they were like very attractive girls, and like, sure, they have all these guys hitting on them one summer, and all the other girls are hooking up, and she's been told, whatever. So then there was a call to break up. Now I was gutted, because I definitely, like, there's no question, I was in love, and I was heartbroken after that. That was the first real pinch, because I always joke that I accidentally fell in love. I didn't go out seeking it or anything like that, but that was the first kind of like taste of, that like real rejection. Fuck, this hurts, this is painful. And ironically, it's like I can still look back at that time, and I was actually going, that was an amazing time in my life. I was still like, as gut-wrenching and painful as it was nothing compared to what was down the tracks. The worst period of my life, but I still had a laugh. I was still going out, smoking weed with friends, partying every night. I was in America that summer. It was an amazing summer. Then we got back together. Then the kind of like, then I was here going, the trust was gone.
Yeah, betrayed. You were betrayed. Yeah.
Nothing was the same. We weren't close. We weren't like holding hands or doing any of that stuff. It was just like we were both here going, fucking, and like, I wouldn't say she was any better at communicating around this than I was, but and then obviously what happened, but then there was an on and off kind of thing over the next few years. That's when it would have become toxic. Like, realistically speaking, I should have said, okay, you really hurt me, blah, blah, blah. This has happened. I get it to an extent. We're young, whatever. If we're going to get back together, we have to talk about this, but everything in hindsight didn't do any of that.
Yeah, no shit. Yeah, it's very, very common. Very common.
It's nothing she did, it just happened.
That's what I was wondering, honestly. When you said I was going for it, what I was really going for was you a little bit. I wondered if it was her, or if it was things that she did that brought things within you to the surface, right? Like, oh, that's touching a sore spot in me, or that's speaking to my vulnerability, or, if there was anything that was particularly impactful for you.
Nah, there were a couple of things that hurt, but later on we were kind of just hurting each other. But like, there was nothing kind of sinister or anything like that, or she wasn't like poking buttons or going, nothing like that at all.
Well, I had a guest on a couple of shows ago, and she was talking about like baseline feelings of unworthiness or self-limiting beliefs, right? And if you take this view that you're unlovable, or you're, not good enough in some way out into the world, and then people reflect that back to you, right? Sometimes it can really flare you up and take you to a crazy place, but it's actually because you were carrying that around to begin with. It just sort of like poked something that was already there, And
I mean, I'm sure I've had a bit of that all my life. Yeah, so it was all my insecurities.
And it's crazy. We all do it. We all try that makeups to breakups, and let's try it again, and let's put it back together, and let's make it like it used to be. And it's never like it used to be. You know what I mean? It's like you can take a dog apart and you can stitch it back together, and it's not going to bark. It just doesn't work the same way the second time. And it's just, I think that's part of it, though. And isn't it beautiful, right? Like that gut punch pain, like, what? It's scary and it's terrifying, but we get into day in and day out and just the humdrum of life, and you think back to those times, and it was like the most important thing, right? Like it just dominated the consciousness, and that pain overwhelms you. But how blessed are we to feel that deeply about something,
Yeah, pretty special.
versus just going through kind of shrugging. You're like, no, my fucking guts are ripped out here. Like that is like, you know, you won't feel that way again. Not in the same way, you know?
No. That's a good thing.
Right. Could we survive it twice, right? Like maybe it's a good thing we go through it once. So I don't know. There's just something to early experiences and the power of that. And we're learning that about all the trauma work that's out there right now, right? There's just real power to, you know, childhood and adolescence and early adulthood and the things you go through there. They really do set the stage for the rest of your life. So God bless you, man. You survived it. You made it. You're on the other side of it. You know, you get your patch. You get like, you know, you've earned that badge like the Boy Scouts, and now you move on, you know? So speaking of moving on, so how do you put the pieces back together? How did you? I mean, you've got this medical nightmare, cognitive dissonance. People are saying, hey, you're fine, dude. And you're like, I'm crawling out of my skin. I'm not fine. I really felt you in that moment because I've had that experience. I've been in that emergency room where they show you the EKG and you're like, dude, there's nothing wrong. And I'm like, this does not feel right. So I appreciate you reminding me of that because I've been there. Before we go on, I want to say a few words about Anu Behavioral Health. Anu Behavioral Health is an outpatient provider of mental health and substance abuse services in Ohio and New Hampshire. That means that Anu can successfully treat mental health and substance abuse issues or dual diagnosis if you're struggling with both. Their integrated approach allows for them to successfully address issues related to anxiety, depression, addiction, trauma, and really anything that stands between your life and the life you could be living. You really cannot bring them an issue that they have not successfully treated. They have also solved one of the biggest problems for people seeking help. They have a dedicated team waiting to hear from you at helpnow@anubh.com. If you contact them today, within 24 hours, you will have heard back from, wait for this, a real live person, and will also have your first appointment scheduled at that time. So how do you contact them? Well, if you're in Ohio or New Hampshire, you're probably close to one of their local locations. You're welcome to go in. If not, you can always reach them online at anewbh.com. And if you're interested in services for you or loved one, use that address, helpnow@anewbh.com. You know, you read your book and you realize you got a name for it now. You got panic disorder. But what did you do to start regaining control of your life? What did you do that made a difference and kind of put you back on a level playing field?
That's the real long drawn out part of it. Because, you know, obviously I always believe there's a quote from J.K. Rowling that says, understanding is the first step to acceptance, and only with acceptance can there be recovery. And I love that. I think like a foundation for all of this work is understanding, acceptance, healthy expectations, patience, and self-awareness. So I had limited understanding then, very limited understanding. But I had hope for the first, because I'd run out of hope. So that was like, you know, enough to re-energize me somewhat. So over the next, but I also, as I'm sure you've experienced yourself, and as anyone who's experienced debilitating anxiety, panics, issues with their mental health, whatever it may be, is just that inability to accept reality and just long for just a time machine to take you back for the past. So now that I had my diagnosis, so to speak, I was looking for cures on the internet, and Google will fire them all up. So I was like, you know, doing a lot of online programs that promised to cure me of my anxiety, reading a lot of books, seeing specialists. And it was like, it was peaks and valleys, you know, that the headache subsided somewhat. I got some sort of reprieve from that, but it was still pretty much there for the bones of a decade. Like I still get headaches today, but the next 5 years were brutally frustrating. And I was just kind of like going through the motions. I had a job in an office. I got on really well with my colleagues. The owners were cool, so it was like, it was easy for me. And they kind of knew that I did have the anxiety and panic stuff. So, I wasn't like, if I said, I can't do that. That was accepted. Do you know what I mean? Like giving big presentations or anything like that was just like, I mean, I did have a panic attack trying to give one once, but to a smaller kind of group of people. But like, so they were very kind and warm and compassionate in that sense. So I was comfortable there, and I literally got on great with the majority of people in the office. I didn't have major, it was a small office. I was there for 5 years, but it was like going like, I'm just kind of comfortable. I'm just going through the motions here. I'm just like doing the week and then just going out and getting shit faced at the weekend and feeling awful, but not really making any progress. And then it was like, what the fuck am I doing with my life? I don't really know, because I'm not like, this is not like my path. Not that I know what my path still is today, really, but like it wasn't that. And it was only because I really got on so well with the people in the office that I stayed there for so long. So then it was like, I gotta make a change. I gotta do something. And I was on a snowboarding trip, and I slipped a disc in my back, which was excruciatingly painful, and that kind of put me out of exercise for about 6 months. So when I started two things were happening. I was making plans to get a visa to go to Vancouver, and I was rehabilitating this back. So I was seeing a physio every week, and then like looking at ways to strengthen up my core and all that. Pilates and yoga was kind of like something I'd thought about for a while. So I eventually went to a Pilates class, and that was crazy. It was
a different kind of sore, Yeah.
Yeah, it was like I managed, like, because I was like, my anxiety was like, oh man, I don't want to walk into a class. It's going to be full of hot chicks. I'm going to be the only dude there.
Sounds awful.
And I'm gonna like, it is when you like a crippling anxiety, and I'm gonna look like an absolute dipstick.
Yeah, I get
it. I convinced one of my good friends to come with me, and we went, and it was a new enough studio. And like, again, we're going back a while, so especially in Ireland, yoga hadn't really taken off yet, or Pilates, and so like it was just the two of us and the teacher. And the teacher was gorgeous. And like, I'm friends with her to this day, funnily, but we were there, and like she'd make us put our feet in these little rings and kind of hold them up in the sky. And fuck me, I was like, and his leg as well, to be fair, was just like just absolute tremors. Both our legs were shaking like crazy. I'm a bit giddy, so when I get like in a really uncomfortable situation, especially back then with friends, I'd start laughing. So the two of us just kind of like pissed our way laughing through the class, and then eventually went back, and like I started going more and more. But then there was also yoga available, and I was here going like, maybe yoga will be a bit more gentle on my body, because like she'd make you do these things where you lift up your leg and rotate your hips, and it was fucking agony.
Yeah, it's awful.
Unbelievable.
It's awful. Yeah, and it's different. And guys, you want to go in and like throw some weights around, right? Or go for a run or something. It puts you in these really vulnerable, like different positions. And it's just, like I said, a different kind of sore. It's like you didn't really know, the simplest thing could have you shaken like that,
Yeah, and I had enough shit stored in those hips at that stage anyway. So I went to the yoga class, and I was here, oh, that's really nice. But it was sore as well. And then I started, like, the wheels were in motion. I got my visa to go to Canada, so I'd like had an exit date from work and all that kind of stuff, and a flight booked. So I'd done yoga a little bit before, so I knew when I got to Vancouver, I was going to, find yoga studios, and they had hot yoga there, which isn't Bikram. I don't know if you're familiar with the yogas, but like I feel Bikram is a bit of the antichrist, because I think it's not about healing or anything like that. It's about pushing you beyond your comfort zone, and like just it's mental.
There's some sinister, shady stuff behind that. Anyway, I watched a documentary.
Yeah, with the
Yeah. So there were some ulterior motives going on there for sure. So,
well, I mean, there's so much of that shit in the healing world anyway. But
one thing about your story though, like that's amazing, man. Honestly, is like you're trying to live a life while you're having this panic disorder, and just because you got your book, it's not like you were cured that day, right? And so you're still struggling, but like you were willing to put yourself out there and try new things. You know what I mean? I'm going to put myself in uncomfortable positions, which I hope people understand with somebody who has a panic disorder is like walking the high wire over the Grand Canyon, right? Because like it's okay if it goes well, but if it goes bad, it goes really bad, really fast when you put yourself in new positions, you know, in new situations. So I actually, kudos to you, man. Very impressive that you were willing to continue to try to find a solution in the midst of your struggles. It's hard to do.
Also, desperation is a testament to that as well. But I do know what you're saying. Like I know from other people as well, and that's exactly what isn't understood by people who, unless they've actually really been through it. You know, like some medial tasks can be, or chores can be like a massive ordeal.
I wanted to go home, take a hot shower, and sit in a dark room until the next day, and then just survive the next day. You know what I mean? And then get back to the room.
Don't get me wrong. There was, you know, there was a lot of that. You know, there was a lot of rolling around bed, crying. You know, there was all sorts of shit. You know, and there was an awful lot of drinking as well, to kind of like just escape the pain. But when I got to Vancouver, I really launched into this yoga, and I felt really good, and a lot of kind of weight, you know, fell off me, and I was here going, I feel like I'm in better shape than I was when I was 18 years of age. So I was getting all these benefits from different directions, and I was feeling good. And I think I was just energized by, okay, I've made the decision. It's time for a new chapter. And I think sometimes when you actually go in for a new chapter, the body just goes, it just gives you the energy you need to kind of like to go with it. And the benefits of yoga were phenomenal, like absolutely phenomenal. I was living, like I had started to play with my diet a little bit before I left. Like I was just like cutting out the sugars and the processed stuff. And I continued that when I got to Vancouver, and I couldn't get enough of this yoga. I was going like 4 or 5 times a week, easy. And I felt really good.
You found something that had helped. I mean, you'd probably been looking for relief for so long.
Yeah, so that was the big kind of thing maybe I was looking for. You know, like and that's why I believe you need to kind of like, I think talk therapy and everything is vitally important, because we can't comprehend our own thoughts or make sense of them a lot of the time, right? You know, because we're caught up in our different patterns and all of that. And we have our own stories, and, you know, you talk about cognitive dissonance or whatever, but you're telling yourself. I saw a funny meme recently where it said anxiety is basically conspiracy theories against yourself.
Hilarious.
That spoke to me. You know, so but I believe like that kind of what I didn't really understand at the time from doing the yoga is like, it's just like it's healing in so many ways. And what I was learning, again, with no awareness that I was actually doing this. I kind of dipped into meditation before, but like I was learning to breathe. So every yoga class was, let's say it was an hour long. For an hour, I had somebody saying, breathe in, breathe out. You know, like with every pose, they were reminding me to breathe all the time. And I hadn't a clue what, like, the reason. Well, it makes sense to breathe. I know that, but I wasn't able to intellectualize it. I hadn't a clue. And like, I was just learning to breathe. And I remember seeing I think I mentioned this to you when we spoke before, but I remember seeing someone on the street and I was just going, oh shit. I could immediately feel that panic boil up in me, and I was here going, all right, I'm gonna have a panic attack. And I'd run if I could, but I was spotted. And it was too close, it was like going. And something happened. I just, like, something triggered in my head. And I just, like, I took a breath, and I was very, very aware that I was taking this breath. And the moment just kind of like, just literally just like did a leapfrog over it, whatever that amygdala in my brain. And I was able to have a conversation. I was like going, holy shit. Like, that was the most I'm not mad on miracles or whatever, but if they exist, that felt like the biggest miracle I had ever experienced in my life. To that date, I was just like, I was blown away. So I'm having a conversation, not thinking about what words are being exchanged, because I'm doing somersaults in my head celebrating.
The science behind it is all that breath work is you're activating your parasympathetic system, right? So fight or flight, but then there's a whole system in your body that will calm all that down. And so what you were leapfrogging was that primal, identify the threat, because that's what anxiety is. It's an overactive identification system that sees threats everywhere, right? And I've heard it compared to like living with a bear. You may not get attacked, but you're scared of getting attacked all day, every day, right? Like if there's a bear wandering around in your house, and so you're on edge and it burns out your adrenal gland and cortisol shoots through the roof. But that breath work can take you over that to the parasympathetic system, which is like your brakes. So the car is going, 100 miles an hour. Something's got to slow it down. And, as simple as in through your nose, out through your mouth. Make sure, feel your belly to make sure your belly is breathing, not just your chest, because then you're taking a nice, deep, full breath. Something as simple as that can turn a panic-stricken situation into something that you can actually manage. And it's invisible. That's the best part about these interventions. Nobody knows you're doing it, right? Because in a panic state or anxiety, if they gave it special attention, if they said, Nicky, are you doing breath work right now? It's like I'm caught, all that stuff would reveal itself. But you can do it silently and quietly and regain control of your situation. And I'm sure it did feel like a miracle, because you're looking for any sign of hope and any kind of relief. You're like, I just can't feel like this forever, so.
And I think it is obviously breath work. There's mind-based, there's body-based. There's so much science to it. It can get very, very complicated, but just like working with a simple breathing technique. And I think what's most important is that people understand, the importance of repetition and consistency, and don't just become a panic breath worker, because your diaphragm's going to be super tight if you've been breathing only through your thoracic and clavicular zones of breath your whole life and not actually full diaphragmatic breathing. But there's all sorts of things going on that needs to kind of be rewired and reshifted, and you're only going to get that if you continue to practice, and that's why I believe yoga was just so incredibly powerful for me.
Yeah, I saw a thing the other day where there's a lot of elite athletes that are actually doing weighted breathing on their diaphragm. So they'll put weights, like sandbags, not like 100 pounds, but 5 pounds, 10 pounds, just teaching that diaphragm, to be stronger. So when it needs to pull open and expand those lungs, it's used to doing it weighted. And so when the weight is literally and figuratively lifted off, it's got that strength, and they get deeper, fuller breaths. I thought that was amazing. That's the first I'd heard of that, but it makes a lot of sense,
Yeah, for sure. And you probably don't watch too much rugby in New England.
I've seen it. I'm impressed, but I don't watch it, keep up with the leagues or anything. Yeah.
But so at the moment, the Rugby World Cup is going on at the moment. and Ireland were playing South Africa, and they're kind of in the rankings, they're number 1 and 2 in the world, and this is in the group stages. Anyway, Ireland won. Just have to remind people of that. But there's footage of them, and they all come together. The 15 players on the field. There's a bit of a timeout or whatever, and they all come together in a huddle, and they do a few collective deep breaths. So like it's leaking down to elite athletes.
Yeah, they're taping their mouth shut when they sleep, and all the nasal breathing and diaphragmatic. So yeah, it's interesting too, because for me, when I got into that situation, I tried everything, because obviously I was a therapist and I knew all the tricks, and so I did all the interventions and all the things that did the work on myself to try to manage my anxiety. And I got to tell you, it all pretty much failed. I don't know if there's something to, like, you can't heal yourself or whatever, but my approach was, I want to get as healthy as I can around the problem. Okay, if the problem's out of my control, then let me get as healthy as I can around it, right? So I went and got blood work. I'm not a big doctor guy. I saw a ton of doctors, and I just got all the tests that I could. I had a sleep study done. I did all these different things, and it's like, let me just, worked on my diet, exercise, things like that when I could. And it's like, let's just get, fine. If I can't touch this thing, then let me touch everything else that I can have control over. And for me, not to get too far down the road, but I had identified sleep was one of my big problems. I wasn't getting the proper sleep, and that was something that once I fixed that, then I had the resources to do other things, and it kind of cascaded. It sounds like you had kind of a similar approach, even if it wasn't conscious. It's like, I found relief in yoga. I'm getting these secondary benefits. Let this build a foundation for me, and then I'll be stronger and more capable and can apply those skills to the main problem, which was all this panic that you were feeling. Did that eliminate it? I mean, did that knock your panic attacks out to where you were like just smooth sailing from then on, or was it still kind of a bumpy road even with the yoga?
I don't think it's ever been smooth sailing. I think there's still like it was like there was a lot of kind of rough stuff. So but to a degree, I don't like. I've immersed myself in breathwork training since then. I think also I had to kind of learn, to confront resentments and let go of, and build my confidence up, and so there was a lot of other stuff that needed to take place parallel with this. But I believe that's was the greatest weapon in allowing me to kind of, take those steps and find the strength and courage to do it. And like sometimes, like even coming on this podcast today, I was like, oh fuck, I could, I gotta go do some breathing exercise. What's this lad gonna ask me, and all this kind of stuff going on, because it's not like an everyday occurrence. So it can certainly still be there guiding me and all that kind of stuff, but I have so many tools, and like so the way I see it is like, when you have that foundation in place, then you can have, you can build your tools and like really work to regulate your nervous system, but you still gotta, like, I'm a big believer, like, as a guy, to an extent, I kind of find like personality traits quite important in all of this and helping us understand ourselves better. And I would be high in neuroticism anyway, right? And there's only so much wiggle room you can have with them. Obviously, if you're in the thick of it with anxiety or depression or whatever, you're going to score much higher, and that can come down significantly. But you still got a baseline neuroticism that you probably have to accept that's maybe higher than someone who's had it a bit more easy. But I believe that like that foundation is essential, and then I believe like we gotta have some tools. But I think there's a lot of people that and this is just kind of my way of intellectualizing it and understanding it. And I fear a lot of people just go too hard on yoga or too hard on breath work. Not even too hard, but just presented it as the be all and end all. And it's like, no, like there's like we're we turn on our YouTube today and there's like 50 videos telling you you're a piece of shit. You know what I mean? Like, and like, so we have all this exposure and we're comparing ourselves to other people. Cheap dopamine is available everywhere. There's just so much going on that needs to be better managed. And I think it's vitally important to be at least aware of that. And like, we've got like, as our societies become more individualistic, as remote work becomes more prevalent and a lot more people, like the happiest days I've had working were back in the office doing a job I didn't like. I'm really passionate about this work, but a lot of it is just me on my own, so there's like all sorts of things to kind of figure out and understand what your values are, what your needs are, and through the lens of human needs psychology, figure out what destructive behaviors and patterns you're running and how best to change them, and what are the big changes that need to occur in your life to ensure you're meeting them in a healthy level. And I think that's where, like, we have the foundation in place. We use the tools to make us feel better, but then you can kind of like really go after the shit that's going to leave you feeling fulfilled.
Yeah, and it's funny you said that because like I have coaches on and things like that. I mean, I'm open to any form of healing. I mean, that's one of the like primary things that started this podcast was like, look, I've been a therapist for 20 years, but there's lots of ways to heal, and I want people to know about all of them because it's a buffet. Take what works for you and just leave the rest for other people, right? But I do worry a little bit in the sort of coaching world, exactly what you just talked about, that over dependence on like the one trick, right? So like, I'll give you an example, like cold plunging is like a big deal right now, right? So, and it works. It's great. It's fucking horrible. I've done it a lot and it's terrible every single time. It's terrible. But you feel better afterwards. You do. It just works, right? But if I start my journey and I think about you and it's like, okay, I'm going to stop drinking. I'm going to replace it with yoga. And that's one tool that I have in my toolbox. Like, okay, great. That's a positive change. Go for it. But like if a year later, that's the only tool you still have, I worry, right? Like I worry that you're set up for that cliff, down the road, because what happens when your nervous system adjusts and it's not enough, right? And how come, now 1 minute's not enough. You got to do 3, you got to do 5, you got to whatever. And it's sort of a dependence in a different way, right? If all you have is that one thing. And I saw it a lot in our world with medications, right? Like people would get Ativan or lorazepam, Valium or something like that. And they're like, okay, I feel better after I take my medication, but they don't do the work. And so a year later, it's only the medication. And then another year passes, and now I need more and more of the medication. And so I love what you just said about diversifying and still continuing to evolve and doing the work behind that. Use the interventions to stabilize you, to give you that moment of clarity, to give you a moment of peace. But you got to dig in afterwards and get at the thing that caused the problem in the first place. Or you're always just waiting, you know what I mean, for that cycle to continue, I think.
No, yeah, I fully agree. And I also agree that there are so many options out there. It's just because this is a framework in my head that I will try guide people through to significantly improve their life. That's the objective of it, right? But there are so many, and actually, because we spoke about this recently, and it kind of inspired me. Just scribble some words, and it goes like, because one thing that really bothers me is that so many people fall into learned helplessness because there are so many instant cures. And I get it, right? Because we have to have conviction in what we're selling, so to speak. And we have to have belief, right? And one thing that people struggling with anxiety seem to demand even more than most people in the world, and most people just demand it at a high level anyway, is absolute certainty, right? And you cannot give that to someone, but they'll get it from a lot of these things, and then they'll, because that's what will make the whoever the money, right? So they'll get there, like, do this hypnosis for 5 minutes and you'll never have anxiety again. And you're like, fuck off, right? That is not, like, what kind of level anxiety are we treating here? But, and maybe that works for some people. And if it does, great. I don't really believe it. But there's so many different modalities where everyone's shitting on each other. And also, the person that really is impacted is the person that needs to kind of understand that it's not a be all or end all. Like, if this works, if this doesn't work for you, see it as a positive. You came in, give it your best, give it whatever amount of time, give it all your energy, give it your best. But if it doesn't work, that's great. Now you can move on and try something else. And there's literally a list of 20, 30 things I came up with in about 5 minutes.
It's the Thomas Edison. Now you know 1,000 ways not to make a light bulb, right? That's what Thomas Edison said about his failures. He said, I never failed. I just learned 1,000 ways not to make a light bulb. And then I figured out how to make it, right? It's the same sort of thing. You try yoga, no impact. Okay, nothing lost. Like, move on. It's not a failure. It just is an indication that that's not the thing that's going to work for me. So let me try something else, right? And it's almost unlimited. It really is, because the behavioral interventions are out there because you're just looking for changes that are the difference that makes a difference. Just something to set you off in a positive trajectory, to give you a little bit of hope. And then you're off,
Fully agree. And that's why I think, like, patience and managing expectations, right? Because from something, you'll get something. You will always get something, even if it's not you want. You'll get a lesson somewhere along the way. But, like, even if something doesn't work out, you might learn something vitally important that's going to take you to the next thing that does work out. And it doesn't. Like, there are so many, from the weird and like, there's just so many things, right? Like, crystal healing works for some people.
Yeah.
I'm not buying that, but, like, fuck, if it works for you, amazing.
Grounding's one, right? Go stand in the grass, and people swear by it, every morning sunshine and grounding.
One thing I would say to people is, if they're listening, obviously they're listening, but like, to those listening, but is to, like, I would exercise caution in who you're telling. Because when I started trying to delve into deeper things, and I want to do a Reiki session, or I want to do a hypnosis, or I want to, I'd often hear, well, why do you think that will work when nothing else has worked before?
That's right.
And that's a horrible thing to. So what the fuck you want me to do? Just, like, be miserable and So, but people say that without thinking of the consequences of their words. And it can be really disheartening and destabilizing for someone who's really struggling as is, to hear those words echo back to them when they're trying to be optimistic and go, like, look, I found this, and obviously you want to share, like, this, I think this might help. And what you want to hear back is, yeah, fuck, go for it.
Maybe, yeah, give it a try. Yeah, it might be the thing. Yeah.
But unfortunately, that's not the words so often that we hear back. And I think that's damaging. So I think, yeah.
I mean, just recognizing that people are struggling are a seriously vulnerable population. We talk about all the protections legally and otherwise for vulnerable populations like children and, people who are under duress. And I talked about the homeless population earlier, but you nailed it, man. I mean, if you take away somebody's hope in that moment, they are vulnerable when they come to you with that information. And to rip it away, to engage in, what they call contempt before investigation. Like, we're not even going to try, and we're already going to start dismissing it, right? That's contempt before investigation. that may be that last piece. I mean, you don't know that person didn't tell themselves, I'm going to try this, and if this doesn't work, I'm done. And you rip it out of their fucking hands before they even get a chance, and you've taken their last piece of hope. And what's a person supposed to do with no hope? That doesn't end well, you know. Nicky, one thing I'm curious about, man, and I know it's funny. It's like, it's almost like Alcoholics Anonymous, man, with two anxiety get together. Like we could swap stories, and yeah, I definitely know how you're feeling, but I want to be respectful of your time. But one thing I am curious about is, when did it switch from you for you, but from I need to help myself to what you've done, which is to start helping others? I'm curious about that.
I've always been an empathetic person. I've always enjoyed helping others and I think, like, when I was going through it was such a lonely and isolating experience. I was going to go like, it's just kind of like, I knew I was going to help people if I ever figured out how I could help them. And it kind of just naturally happened with some friends as they kind of grew up, and they're maybe going through shit, and I was like going like, I was reading all these books in psychology and everything like that, so I was able to kind of like just help them better understand their problems. And if you take anxiety out of the mix, it's pretty easy to help people navigate their problems. I still procrastinating on this, but like I wrote a blog post. Well, I want to write a book. I am writing a book. It's in process, but it's like I wrote it 6 years ago, and then I just hear going, I'm gonna have to. I couldn't write nearly well as I could today. I was like, I got to do it again, and just kind of being a bit disheartened or whatever. I got to sort out other stuff. But I put out one, my first blog post was called Panic, the Mother of All Fuckers. And that's what I'll call the book. Just like I'd done weekend retreats and all that kind of stuff, on different self-development and whatnot. And anytime I was in a position to help someone and saw that, like, I could see some pain in them, which I could also empathize within myself, and I kind of like it obviously selfishly make me feel good as well. And then it just kind of like happened. It was a natural evolution. I was just kind of like doing the Instagram thing and whatnot. I had an Instagram account which I subsequently deleted, but and then got a new one because I realized that was a stupid mistake. But and I just started reaching out to people to see, I can work with you for a month for free. I want to prove to them this is something I think that's meaningful. I'd feel good doing, blah, blah, blah. And I just wanted to kind of explore whether I was good enough to be in a position to kind of like make some sort of career out of it.
Have you had some success? Have the people you've worked with made progress, and you feel like you've made a difference?
Yeah, for sure. Not on a massive scale, like, because I work quite intimately with people, but I've some people have, like, there's some case studies there that I could rattle off back to you where, like one that always comes to mind is a girl who had such severe agoraphobia, she hadn't left her house in 13 years, and what she had been through that had put her into that level of debilitating anxiety was horrifying. And today she's less anxiety than me, and I can promise you that she's less anxiety than me today. She's married, she has a kid, she doesn't have a care in the world. And this was like, we kind of did, obviously this was like, I was just supporting her as best I could. It wasn't like a transactional thing. And I messaged her like 6 months ago. I said, am I remembering this all correctly? Because it was just like seemed so mental. And so I have had some success, and I've had some failures too, like it doesn't always work out. And I think, I thankfully learn from each and every one of them and try to hone my processes and make sure that I'm really confident that I only work with people that like I know that I can help. But yeah, so definitely, I mean, there's some success there. I don't feel comfortable talking about it too much.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
like,
of course. Well,
testimonial, pretty
God,
happy with myself.
God forbid you get too confident in yourself, man. Because it sounds like you're doing some really good work. But I mean, it's like a paramedic, right? Like, how many lives do you have to save before you decide you're a good paramedic? I mean, you got to give yourself a little bit of grace there. And I think the attempt to help is the success, because it would be so easy to be bitter and resentful and frustrated through all you've gone through and say, why did this happen to me? And play the blame game. But to turn from inward to outward and offer that gift. And I mean, I've taken every class and got all the degrees in therapy and all the experience. And I have people I worked with that are drinking today, that are in bad relationships today. With humans, working with humans, it's an art, not a science. And so you're never going to be 10 for 10. You know what I mean? So I think it's amazing, and I hope you'll continue. I hope you keep spreading the word, and I hope the book gets rewritten, and I hope you send me a copy so I can hype it up here, and I hope that you keep working with people, because I think you have an amazing story, and I think we would all lose something if you pulled back and didn't help, because there's somebody out there that you're going to save their life, just like you saved that girl's life, and I think that's pretty special. So I don't know. I hope you stick with it, I guess.
Thank you very much.
Of course. Nicky, like I said, we could talk all day, but how do we find you, sir? How do people want to connect with you? How do they reach out and make contact?
My website is nickycullen.com if they want to go straight there. My Instagram is nickycullen.com written out as well. And my Facebook is, I don't know, I think it's nickycullen.com, but I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, they'll find you.
I think it might be just Nicky Cullen.com. But if they go to the website, that's like the kind of intro that has all other goals. And if they want to have a chat, they can reach out to me through there.
And who do you hope will reach out to you? Like, who should be looking for your services?
It varies, right? Because it can be like, even sometimes it doesn't have to necessarily be, there's such a stigma around the word of anxiety, but I just think like emotional distress in general. Like if you just like, I guess if you listened and you feel like you could relate and you feel like speaking with me might help you, then I'm sure it would. But like I always just have a chat with people before we do any work together and have a program and explain to them what we're doing and how we're going to do it. But if it's, I always say, right, what I do for others is what I desperately wish someone would have done for me, and build that on pillars of, it's coaching and breath work and accountability and support. We're coming together to form a relationship where the objective is to kind of help you get as much better as you can, as quickly as we can. And that's it's obviously some people in general, I would go, okay, let's leave 2 or 3 months for this. This is what we'll do. And some people will do about half of it and they're already going, this is amazing,
Yeah.
I'm sound. This is good. I'm going to hold on to, and come back. And then I'll hear from them a year later and they're going through a little stressful time and they want to have a call. That's easy. But it all depends on, the spectrum of and just how complicated the problem is, whether, how severe the anxiety is. And the only way to really do that is, like, I just encourage people, just have a chat. It costs nothing to like sit down with me for 30 minutes and talk about what you're going through to see if I am the right person to help you, because I only want to work with people who are convinced I'm the right person to help them. And, you know, I'm open about that. And if they feel something else is better for them, then they absolutely should do that, because it's their life and it's their health and it's their happiness. And this is, you know, serious. It's not a bag of sweets.
And if they're local, you're throwing some surfing lessons too, right, man?
I don't know. I'd be looking for the surfing lessons. I'd take an exchange for that.
All right. Well, I tried to get you a little bonus package in there with some surfing lessons as well. But listen, Nicky, thank you for making the time, man. I mean, I'm bitching about being in here at midnight, but you're here on your weekend. You're giving me your time, and you did a great job as far as like just being raw and honest about your experiences. A lot of guys in general have a hard time talking about what they struggle with. You know, men are taught the whole, you know, suck it up and get over it. And so I know that the more personal something is, the more universal it is. And I have zero doubt that somebody's heard your message and is better off for just knowing that you can be a man, have these struggles, be honest about it, and life can still get better. As a matter of fact, being honest about it helps things get better. So just sincere gratitude and thanks for sharing the real parts of your story, because it's messy, but it looks like you're in a good place, and there's a lot of inspiration to be taken from that as well. So I really appreciate you coming on, and thank you for sharing your story.
Legend, Jason. Thank you so much for having me. And yeah, this has been great. It's been a pleasure getting to know you. We've spoken twice, and I'll continue to follow your journey for sure. It's been an absolute blast, man.
For sure, man. This isn't our last chat. We'll connect. I've got your website, so I know how to find you, and we'll follow up on that book. But this isn't our last talk for sure. But thank you, and Ian, Ava, thank you for being here. I got a production team in here late at night. For those wondering, no, they don't get bonus pay for coming in late. That's great. They're doing it for their own heart and their own contribution to the good of the world. And as always, the most important thanks is for you guys listening in your car, watching us at home, on your tablet, whatever you're doing. You know, if you're going through a rough time, you've heard the message from our sponsor already. If you think that Nicky might be a good match for you, I would encourage you to reach out. You know, as a therapist, I know people that are bringing the real stuff, and Nicky's really been through it, and he's got a real perspective on this. And so if you connect with him and think that you might be able to form a relationship, I'd encourage you to give a try. But just thank you for your time. It's your most valuable asset. You just spent an hour or so with us, and I hope you got something from it. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for that. And until next time, take care of yourself and take care of each other. Thanks so much. Hey guys, although Through Helping Back is an excellent podcast with a lot of great ideas, I do want to let you know that in no way is Through Helping Back expected to be perceived as or relied upon in any way as specific medical advice or mental health advice for you personally. The information provided through Helping Back on our website or our podcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment that can be provided by your own providers. Do not use our content in lieu of professional advice given by qualified medical professionals, and do not disregard professional medical advice or delay seeking professional advice because of the information you have read on our website, heard on our podcast, or otherwise received from us. Although we love discussing issues related to healthcare, mental health, and addiction, we are not providing direct healthcare, mental health care, medical, or nutrition therapy services. We're not attempting to diagnose, treat, prevent, or cure in any manner whatsoever any physical or psychological ailment, any mental or emotional issue, disease, or condition. We are not giving you specific medical, psychological, or religious advice whatsoever. Please take care of yourself and take care of others as you always seek the advice of your own medical providers and your own mental health providers regarding any questions or concerns you have about your specific health, or before implementing any recommendations or suggestions from us. These are ideas that have worked for other people. We think it's important to share them. We do not guarantee that they will work for you specifically. Do not stop taking any medications without speaking to your physician. nurse practitioner, physician assistant, mental health provider, or any other healthcare or medical professional. And if you have or suspect that you have a medical or mental health issue, contact your own healthcare provider promptly. Also, one last thing, if you know or suspect that you are currently experiencing a crisis, it is absolutely imperative that you seek the advice of your doctor or other emergency healthcare services prior to ever thinking about using our content. We love the conversations. We're glad you're stopping by. We hope you take a lot from the content. But again, for your specific individual medical situation, please always seek quality personal care from your own providers. Do not let this information or this advice stand on its own. Thanks so much for listening.